if you're anything like me, you probably have a soft spot for those massive, genetically engineered hybrid monsters we see in sci-fi movies today. I mean, it's just human nature to wonder, right? What happens if you take the armor of one beast, the teeth of another, and just kind of smash them together? But well, here's the secret Hollywood doesn't want you to know. Mother Nature actually ran these exact same wild experiments in the fossil record millions of years before we ever even thought to put them on a movie screen. So welcome to this explainer. I'm putting on my paleontologist hat today to show you that some of the strangest, most bizarre mashups in Earth's history were actually very, very real. Okay, let's dive into this. We are taking a quick museum tour through 5 bizarre evolutionary case studies. We're talking prehistoric hybrids brilliantly engineered for survival. We'll look at why prehistoric hybrids weren't accidents, the gorilla horse browsing machine, bear dogs as the perfect predators, a Triassic plesiosaur giraffe, the bobblehead carnivore, and finally, hell pigs, the opportunistic bone crushers. Section 1. Prehistoric hybrids weren't accidents. Form follows function in the fossil record. To really get these animals, we first have to understand that these creatures weren't, genetic mistakes or laboratory accidents. We have to grasp convergent evolution. Basically, this is what happens when completely unrelated animals evolve similar physical traits to adapt to similar ecological niches or survival challenges. Think of it like a giant puzzle. Nature has a toolbox, and when a creature faces a very specific survival problem, nature combines the absolute best blueprints available to solve it, even if it makes the final animal look a bit like a Frankenstein monster. Let's move on and see how this builds. Because look at the massive spans of time we're covering today. We're bouncing all the way from the early Triassic period, 249 million years ago, through the Eocene and Oligocene epochs, all the way up to just 800,000 years ago in the Pleistocene. These extreme evolutionary mashups didn't just happen once. They happened repeatedly throughout Earth's history whenever the environment demanded a radical new survival strategy. Section 2. The gorilla horse browsing machine. Enter the Chalic affairs. Dating back to the Oligocene epoch, it is absolutely awe-inspiring how distinctly this creature blends 2 totally different mammals. First, you've got horse traits, a long face with muscular, prehensile lips that are just perfect for grabbing soft vegetation. And remarkably, horses actually are their closest living relatives. But then, instead of hooves for galloping, they had elongated, incredibly powerful arms built for knuckle walking, just like a gorilla, complete with massive, sharp claws on 3 functional digits. So why on earth would a horse cousin need gorilla arms? Well, it's all about selective advantage. By walking on their knuckles, they protected those sharp claws. They could stand up, use those incredibly long, powerful arms to reach high into the branches of wooded areas, and literally pull down soft vegetation that other herbivores simply couldn't reach. And hey, if a predator came sniffing around, they could swing those powerful, heavily clawed arms with mighty force to bash in any would-be attackers. It was a flawless solitary survival strategy that let them navigate and spread across Europe, Asia, Africa, and North America. And they weren't small either. 1.1 tons. That is the weight of the giant family members of this group, like the Moropus. While some were kind of the size of sheep, these larger guys were standing 8 feet tall at the shoulder. That is taller and vastly heavier than Shaquille O'Neal. They were massive, highly successful ecosystem engineers. Section 3. Bear dogs, the perfect predators of the Amphicyonidae family. Transitioning to the Middle Eocene about 45 million years ago, this beast took the absolute best from 2 of today's dominant carnivores. From the dog side, they developed elongated limbs for really swift movement, longer snouts, and comparable, highly specialized dentition. From the bear side, well, they inherited a flat-footed stance and absolutely massive sizes, growing up to 1,700 pounds. That's the size of a modern Kodiak bear. They were, for sure, nightmarish apex predators. If we act as the evolutionary scorekeeper here, you can totally see how this played out. Their specialized shearing teeth and massive bodies gave them a huge selective advantage to overpower any prey and absolutely dominate empty predator niches. In fact, this design was so flawless, it remained a stable blueprint for roughly 30 million years. They were the absolute kings of their environment. The old "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" rule definitely applied here. But the drawback? That intense, hyper-focused specialization made them deeply vulnerable to rapid climate change and habitat loss, causing their eventual downfall. So, let me ask you a question. Think about gravity for a second. How does a creature with a rigid 10-foot neck survive on dry land without just snapping it? To answer that, we have to pivot way back to the early Triassic and look at an utterly absurd body plan. Section 4. A Triassic plesiosaur giraffe. The mystery of the Tanystropheus. Meet the Tanystropheus. This bizarre reptile grew up to 20 feet long, and its neck alone accounted for half of its entire body length. At first glance, it really looks like a plesiosaur. It had similar interlocking conical teeth, designed perfectly for a diet of snagging, slimy, wriggly fish and cephalopods. But unlike a true, fully aquatic plesiosaur, whose long neck would literally break under its own weight on dry land, the Tanystropheus was built more like a giraffe. Its neck was incredibly stiff, constructed almost like a rigid bridge, stabilized by bone and really powerful tendons. This actually allowed it to elevate that massive structure while out of the water. This created a super unique semi-aquatic lifestyle where it was perfectly capable of resting on land. The leading theory is that it acted as a biological fishing rod. It could sit comfortably on the shore or in the shallows, suspend that stiff 10-foot neck right over the water, and ambush fish without its body ever casting a shadow. But there was a brutal evolutionary trade-off. While perfect for hunting, that fatal vulnerability was that the long neck was a massive exposed target. The fossil record shows multiple specimens that were violently decapitated by aquatic predators. Section 5. The bobblehead carnivore, Erythrosuchus, after the Great Dying. Dating back 249 million years ago, right after the Permian extinction, also known as the Great Dying, the Earth was essentially a blank slate, and nature engineered a beast built for absolute carnage. This animal was a hypercarnivore. What does that mean? It means its diet consisted of more than 70% meat. It wasn't just foraging around, it required incredibly specialized anatomical tools for hunting and consuming flesh to survive in the harsh landscape of Triassic South Africa. So the crucial point is, maintaining a diet of over 70% meat required unparalleled killing power. You simply can't be a hypercarnivore if you can't guarantee your next meal in a scarce, post-extinction ecosystem. Erythrosuchus needed a surefire way to instantly cripple anything it bit. Nature delivered this by essentially putting a T-Rex head on a crocodile's body. Its skull was 3 feet long. That is 25% of its entire body length. To put that into perspective, that's double the proportional size of a human head. It needed that massive skull to pack in as much jaw muscle as anatomically possible. Combined with curved, serrated teeth, it functioned perfectly for crushing through heavily armored herbivores with a single bite. But the cost was heavy. That giant head required a short, stout neck to support it, and the sheer weight made it a slow, ambush-only predator. Section 6. Hell pigs, opportunistic bone crushers. The reign of the entelodonts. Jumping forward to the late Eocene, we meet one of the most successful, adaptable, and, frankly, intimidating hybrids. Genetically, these guys are surprisingly closer to cetaceans, like whales and hippos, rather than actual pigs or hyenas. But practically, they borrowed the most brutal traits from both. From the hyena playbook, they evolved massively reinforced jaw structures and teeth designed specifically to crush bone for marrow. From their hippo cousins, they developed digastric muscles that allowed them to open their jaws to a terrifying 90-degree angle. All of this was supported by large, bony skull protrusions that anchored all that heavy muscle. So why did they need these frightening adaptations? It was all about surviving the dry seasons. When food was scarce, their bone-crushing power allowed them to scavenge carcasses left behind by others, extracting calorie-dense marrow, calcium, and phosphorus. Furthermore, because they had cloven hooves, they couldn't grab or grapple with prey. They had to rely entirely on that incredibly wide bite to get their mouths around moving targets. This extreme adaptability allowed them to thrive across plains and forests in North America, Europe, and Asia for over 15 million years. But that brings us to the ultimate question. We've seen a gorilla horse, a bear dog, a plesiosaur giraffe, a bobblehead killer, and a hell pig. They were all perfectly adapted to their specific environments. So what happens when perfectly adapted hybrids face a rapidly changing world? The truth is, Mother Nature's bizarre survival machines remind us that extreme specialization works flawlessly, right up until the environment shifts. The very adaptations that made these creatures apex survivors ultimately became the anchors that dragged them into extinction when the climate changed or faster competition arrived. But the beauty of paleontology is realizing that Mother Nature never actually stops experimenting. I mean, even just 800,000 years ago, a creature called the Civatherium walked the Earth, basically a giant mix between a giraffe and a moose. It just goes to show the fossil record is an endless laboratory of survival, And you really have to wonder, what bizarre mashup is nature slowly engineering out there right now?